I grew up in a small town, so if you wanted to go to a bigger sized shopping mall, you would have to go to the next city over. The area wasn't the safest, and it was typical for some crime to happen at the mall late at night. I always went in the middle of the day, and usually with other people, but one time I was desperately in need of a prom dress and was running out of time to get one. I had planned to go to the mall after school, but all of my friends had too much homework and couldn't go with me. I decided to just go alone. After all, it was the middle of the day and there would be plenty of other people there. When I got to the mall, I headed straight to the biggest women's clothing store. I made it to the dress section, pleased to find they had plenty of options. I walked around looking at each dress carefully, picking out a few that I liked. I gathered the dresses up and then went to the dressing room to try them on. Just outside of the dressing room, I noticed a middle-aged man sitting in a chair looking around. I thought it was a little strange since this was the women's department, but shrugged it off. He was probably just waiting on his wife to finish trying things on. I put on the first dress and then walked out to the middle of the dressing room, where there was a large mirror that let me see all the different angles of the dress. I was staring at my reflection and trying to decide what I thought about the dress when all of a sudden I noticed the same man from outside the dressing room staring in. His neck was craned and he was looking right at me. It made me uncomfortable, but I was determined to leave the store with a dress that day. I tried on the remaining dresses, noticing that the man still stared at me each time. Once I made my selection, I put my street clothes back on and walked past the man to the register. His eyes bored into me as I walked by. After paying for the dress, I still needed to find the right pair of shoes. I wanted to get away from the creepy man, so I decided to go to a different store at another section of the mall. When I reached the shoe department, I was looking at a pair of heels when I heard someone close behind me. I turned around and quickly recognized the same man from earlier. When we made eye contact, he quickly looked away and pretended to be interested in a pair of shoes. At this point, I was getting creeped out and kind of annoyed. He had followed me from the other store. I decided to just buy the first pair of heels I had tried on so I could go home. As I walked to the register, I noticed the man edging closer, as if not to let me out of his sight. After paying for the shoes, I put the bag over my shoulder and began quickly walking towards the exit of the store. When I got to the parking lot, I was nearly sprinting. All I wanted to do was get in my car. When I got to my car, I saw a large white van parked right next to it. Its doors were wide open, but I didn't see the owner. A bad feeling was developing in the pit of my stomach as I quickly unlocked my car and threw myself inside. Just before I closed the door behind me, a man reached out of the white van and grabbed my arm roughly as if he was trying to pull me out of my car. I screamed and thrashed around until he let go of my arm. I slammed the car door shut and locked it. I quickly put my car into gear and began speeding out of the parking lot. As I was driving away, I saw the same creepy man from inside the mall standing next to the van and pointing at me. When I got home, I filed a police report, but to my knowledge, the man who attempted to kidnap me was never found. When I was in high school, I worked at a jewelry store at the mall to make some extra side money. It was an easy job and my coworkers were all very friendly. One day, I had worked a late shift and got all the way home before realizing that I had left my purse inside the store. I would need my wallet the next day, so I decided to go back in hopes that maybe the mall wasn't locked up yet. When I got there, the janitor was just closing up. I knew him well and explained the situation to him. He was more than happy to let me in. He told me that all the doors were locked, so when I left, all I would need to do was make sure that the door fully shut behind me. I made my way through the pretty dark mall. Only the emergency lights had been left on, but I had worked at the mall long enough that I would be able to find my way around with my eyes closed. When I got to the jewelry store, I unlocked the door with my key and quickly found my purse sitting behind the counter. I picked it up and went to the door to lock it again. Just as I had finished turning the key, I heard a noise from further down in the mall. It sounded like a door shutting. I knew that there was no security guard at this particular mall, so I was confused about what could have made the noise. I chalked it up to my imagination. It had been a long day and I was really tired. Before leaving, I decided I needed to stop by the restroom. I had just entered the stall and closed the door behind me when I heard what I was sure was footsteps coming into the bathroom. I was completely shaken. Had the janitor not realized that there was still someone in the mall before locking up? Surely the person realized that the mall had closed. Were they here to steal something? I was scared of what would happen if they realized I was there, so I quietly stood up on the toilet seat so my feet couldn't be seen from outside the stall. I held my breath and tried to be as quiet as possible. I knew they would probably notice that the stall door was locked and realize that they weren't alone. I waited for whoever it was to use the bathroom or the sink or do anything at all, but all I heard was silence. I waited for what felt like forever before I was finally convinced they had left. I stepped down from the toilet and crouched down to look under the stall and see if I could see any shoes. I saw nothing, so I quietly swung open the stall door. My mouth dropped open at what I saw when I walked out of the stall. On the mirror above the sink was a huge message scrawled out in what looked to be red paint. It read, "I see you," and had a horrifying looking smiley face underneath. I knew in my gut that the message was meant for me. I threw my purse over my shoulder and began sprinting towards the exit of the mall. I didn't bother to take in my surroundings, I just ran until I reached my car. The next day, I reported the incident to my boss, and even though the security cameras were checked, it was never determined who the person was that had been in the mall that night. When I was in high school, I used to work at a pretty nice clothing store at the mall. Most of the people that came in to buy clothes there were pretty well off and would spend quite a bit of money. My job at the store was different depending on how many customers we had at any given time. Sometimes I'd work the register, and other times I'd go around the store, restocking the shelves and making sure everything was clean and organized. One day, I was towards the front of the store and was folding some clothes when two men walked in. I greeted them, but they just ignored me as they walked over towards the section where the wristwatches were. I just shrugged off their rudeness. Some of the people that came into the store were a bit full of themselves. I went back to what I was doing, and the two men examined wristwatches for several minutes. Eventually, my manager came up to me and told me that she was going to take her lunch break and asked if I could cover the register for now. There was another girl out on the floor, so all I would need to do is hang out in back by the register and wait for people who needed to check out. After only about 15 minutes of entering the store, the two men from earlier walked up to the register. They both had serious, unfriendly expressions. One of the men laid 4 designer watches down on the table. I was surprised that they were making a purchase that would be well over $1,000 after looking through the watches for such a short period. One man handed me his debit card and told me it would all be just on one card. After ringing up the items, I swiped his card. There was a beep and a message popped up on the screen saying that the transaction was fraudulent. I immediately knew what that meant. The card was either stolen or lost. I asked the man if he had another card I could use. He shook his head and told me to run it again. He then adjusted his suit jacket just slightly to reveal a gun on his hip. Feeling panicked, I swiped the card once more, and again, I got the same message. Trying not to be suspicious, I pressed a button behind the counter that silently notified security. The men knew then that they had been caught. They turned around and sprinted out of the store, leaving the card and the watches behind. I screamed out for help, and 2 huge security guards were able to tackle them just as they exited the store. I'm so relieved the situation didn't go a darker way. Have you guys ever had a frightening experience in a mall? Drop a comment and don't forget to like and subscribe.